Well, welcome to another episode where we delve into one of the most profound and complex aspects of Africa's history, identity, and future, which is centered around the role of spirituality and religion. For centuries, spirituality has been the heartbeat of African societies. Before colonial contact, indigenous spiritual systems were deeply intertwined with governance, art, agriculture, health, and community life within the African society. These traditions offered frameworks for understanding the world, fostering unity, and ensuring societal balance within African society. However, colonialism disrupted these systems, as we well know, introducing new religious ideologies that often sought to replace rather than coexist with indigenous beliefs. This transformation was not just spiritual, but political, cultural, and psychological as well. It has left a lasting impact, shaping how Africans perceive themselves and their heritage. Today, Africa finds itself at crossroads. While Christianity and Islam dominate the religious landscape, indigenous spiritualities still exist. They persist as well, often blending with these faiths in unique ways. But the lingering question is, how does this complex tapestry of belief systems influence African identity? More importantly, how do these spiritual and religious frameworks impact Africa's development, from governance and education to cultural preservation and nation building? The intersection of spirituality and identity is critical to understanding the continent's past and envisioning its future. This conversation isn't just about history. I think it's about reclaiming narratives, celebrating diversity, and reflecting what it means to be African in a rapidly changing world. So, joining us as we explore the rich, dynamic, and often contentious interplay between spirituality, religion, and African identity, and what it all means for the continent's development in the 21st century, is Mama Litchfield-Tshabalala and Tema and Francisca Mandeya. Mama Khanyisile, would you mind introducing yourself, please?
Something I find very hard to do. I prefer that people introduce me. I find it so uncomfortable. I don't know why to spend time talking about myself. But because you asked me before, so I thought, okay, I'll have a two-liner. For blacks who must still grow to be Africans, I am Dr. Khanyisile Litchfield-Tshabalala, or Admiral Litchfield-Tshabalala, or Honorable Litchfield-Tshabalala. For Africans, you've introduced me right. I am Mama Khanyisile.
Wonderful. Wonderful. And I know you were in the Navy as well, and you were in exile in Angola as a member of Umkhonto Wesizwe. And I know you were also a member of parliament at some point, which is interesting. I won't ask you if you're still in politics, but I think for Africans, politics is a way of life.
Until we are liberated.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Mama Khanyisile. And Tema, could you introduce yourself? I know we had a chat earlier on. Maybe you could give us just a brief bio.
Sanbonani, hello. My name is Temashengu Litchfield-Tshabalala. I write, I speak, I do more creative things. I'm a diehard Pan-African. I concern myself with all things related to African identity, Black identity, especially existing within a quote-unquote post-colonial, post-slavery world. I don't believe that we live in a post-colonial society. I think post-colonialism is very much mythological because colonialism has just taken on different forms. I think we live in a neo-colonial time, and much of what I aim to do within academia and within creative writing is highlighting those aspects.
Thank you so much. And we've got Francisca Mandeya. You just briefly introduce yourself as well.
I'm Francisca Mandeya. I'm married to David. So Temba-Tshuma. I call myself Francisca Mandeya-Tshuma. I'm very interested in Pan-Africanism. I am a grandmother. I am a mother. I'm a wife. I'm a sister. I am an author, a coach, a speaker. And I believe strongly that we should use our voices to speak our truth. And part of the truth that I've been uncovering is to do with my identity and questioning religion, which is something very uncomfortable, but I'm ready for the conversation. I'm ready for the discomfort. So I'm happy to be here as a visitor. I won't be saying much. I'll do mostly listening in this historic podcast, as I got to know. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone. Now, as we mentioned, this is going to be a free-flowing discussion.
Yes.
Yeah. And if I can kick off, as I mentioned earlier, in pre-colonial Africa, spirituality was central to community and governance. How do these historical practices shape our understanding of what it means to be African? In other words, I would be interested to know to what extent does reclaiming indigenous spiritual systems help us to rediscover and redefine African identity?
Okay, so I think let me start as the mother.
Yes.
Temashengu is because the daughter, but also for the perspective of young people. I think that it's actually very sad what we have become as Africans. The Chinese are not confused about who they are. You will not get the citizenship of China unless you learn to speak Mandarin, if they are even giving citizenship. You will not get that of France unless you speak French, and not just speak. They will test you. You need to be at a certain level, because they understand the importance of culture. We've been sold a fallacy that development comes from the economy. It actually doesn't. Development comes from culture. And for Africans, spirituality, it's like a pyramid. Spirituality is at the apex, and the culture is on your right-hand side, because our spirituality is lived through the culture. But you can only know culture if you speak the language. That's why I'm saying it's a triangle. So culture is the vehicle of spirituality, but the language is the vehicle of culture. So the three are inseparable, which is why when they came, it is the spirituality, the culture, and the language that they attacked. That's why you had to change your name. Anything that you were was hidden or backward. So, I read a book, and people always say, please go find it. It was online when I was doing my thesis. And it's 3 Japanese writers who say, Africa will never develop because Africans are the only race that are somebody else before they are African. I mean, Muslims in Africa are first Muslim before they are African.
Absolutely.
Christians are first Christian before they're African. That's why African Day or Africa Day is not a holiday in Africa, except in 5 countries, I think.
Yes.
I calculated about 5.
Yeah.
But Easter, Ramadan, Christmas, they're all holidays, or political holidays, like for us, December 16, which is another sad thing, because the party that takes power then makes the history of the country the history of that party. I think I'll leave it here. We truly are never going to develop unless we understand the theology of spirituality, culture, and language. Everybody that's developed have done it. Renaissance for Europe which is a nice French word, reawakening, was a cultural revolution.
Absolutely.
The French have gone through it. The Chinese have gone. America went through it during the Civil War. The Indians have gone through it, So I think it would be good for me to hear your perspective as a young person. But yeah, for me, that's where the buck stops.
Yeah. I don't know what if you've got anything to add to that, Tema. I know colonialism redefined, as Mama Khanyisile has just said, redefined our spirituality and identity in many ways. How do we disentangle these legacies to understand what it truly means to be African?
I think for me, one of the things that I always found questionable was that we often speak about the impact of colonialism, and we know that by virtue of having been colonized, there are A, B, C, and D things in our cultures that we do not know of or we cannot practice. However, we haven't gotten to the point of naming what are the exact things that have been changed in us by virtue of colonialism. So right now it's just this open-ended thing where it's like colonialism affected us, but how did it do that? And like in what is the extent of it also? Because the way that you as a Ndebele person would be affected as opposed to the way that I as a Swati person would be affected is also different because our cultural constructions were different. The way that the Igbo in Nigeria have been affected by having to, live in a not autonomous cultural setup as opposed to how the Kisi in Kenya have been affected is also different. So we haven't begun to really sit down and name how colonialism has affected our indigenous cultures. But we also don't really put our indigenous cultures at the forefront, which is another thing. We identify more strongly, again, by virtue of colonialism with our nationality, with the colonial borders, which in itself reinforces the colonial legacy than we do with our indigenous cultures. And for me, growing up as a Swati person in a quote-unquote free South Africa, I think one of the things that was important for me was to understand what my cultural identity was. And in unwrapping what my cultural identity was, it then led me to the spirituality as well. Yeah. And once you come to that point, you also then have to contend with what is known as hybridity, kind of, which is the part of you that is the colonial body and then the part of you that is the indigenous body.
Yes.
And in order for the part of you that is the indigenous body to thrive, you do have to confront the colonial body, but you also have to be willing to kill the colonial body. How many of us are willing to kill the colonial body? Because the colonial body is beneficial. It's good to be a coconut. It's good to hide your culture and to suppress it because that is what Westernization will give benefit to. So I think in reclaiming our national identities, and by national I mean our ethnic identities, and in reclaiming our spirituality, we will come to a point of actually seeing what Uma was saying, complete liberation, because with our spirituality, it really does tie to everything. It connects to our philosophical understanding. It connects to epistemology. It connects to how we make art and why we make art. It connects to how we dress ourselves. It connects to our gender relations. It is the very cornerstone of our whole cultural construction. And without that, we cannot have a proper cultural construction. So.
Wonderful. That's very
If
profound.
I want to just chip in, it's interesting that Temashengu says we have not listed those things.
Yes.
And I just love how ancestors whom we never paid homage to when we started, and I always do, but they are still here with us, so we respect them. It's just, for me, reinforces that they are present with us, because what you've just said takes us back to where we are starting, that theology.
Yes.
We haven't named the things. Let's start in spirituality. Yes. How has colonialism rearranged us spiritually? When I say Moari, what gives you the notion that Moari is a male? If I say Mvelingai, how do you come off telling me that Mvelingai is a male? Because we don't have gender grammar. So in Zulu, I say Unomsa, which is a female name. And I still say Usipho. So when I say Mvelingai, where's the mind going that tells me that he's a man? Because we never carved them. We actually, when they came here, colonizers, they laughed at us. They said, you have an absent God. because our originators are not in our lives. It is the deities and the ancestors that are in our lives. So who saw Umvelingangi to come off and tell us that Umvelingangi is a male? It's colonialism. It's when the Zulu royal family converted to Anglicanism that then Umvelingangi begins to take shape of being a male. So it's the first listing that I would say, Mina Temashengu and our two beautiful hosts here. It is the first thing I would list because it has led to such ruthless patriarchy in Africa. We never had an originator whose gender was predisposed. And I love Moari because Moari, and I've just been corrected that Shona in itself is a colonial formation. I'll use it glibly for now. But when pre-colonial, in fact, let me not use the role. When pre-colonial people, to whom Moari was the originator, went to Moari, if they wanted mercy, they would say, oh, the breasted one. If they wanted to defend themselves against an invading force, they would say, oh, the masculine one. You know, they appeal to the masculine side, which tells you that Moari epitomized both genders. So this male god, for me, is the first listing that I would say. And then I would come to the culture itself. African women were never the property of men in any African society. You know, the funny thing, and I've just written a book on this, actually my very first book. You find matriarchy in Africa.
Yes.
You find patrilineality. You find matrilineality, but never patriarchy. So most societies were patrilineal or matrilineal, and people always say, what does that mean? It's very simple. It just means you take, if it's matrilineal, the lineage is taken from the mother's side. If it's patrilineal, from the father's side. So is the inheritance, by the way. It will be the firstborn girl or the firstborn boy.
Yes.
But matriarchy, straight matriarchy in Africa is so rampant, but never patriarchy.
Yeah.
Never patriarchy, but look at our gender relations now, cultural.
Yeah.
African women, we are the most oppressed because also people are confused. I always say, don't confuse yourself. There are only 3 races on earth. The rest are nations. You have us, the Negroid race, which is where the slur of nigger, Negro came from. You have the Caucasian, which is white. You have the Mongoloid, which is, my daughter always corrects me, Oriental, yellow, Arabic. She will say which one of those words, by the way, is not kosher, so that we don't use it anymore. But
Asia.
Yeah.
Which one?
Just say Asia and Middle East.
Asian.
Yeah, Asia and Middle East.
That's Mongoloid. So, but if you put the 3 races on the table now and their genders, who are the most oppressed? It's the African woman. Everybody walks on the head of the African woman. Everybody.
Yeah.
I dare say you even meet gay men who are convinced that the place of an African woman is in the kitchen.
Yeah.
It's absurd.
Yeah.
It's really absurd. But yeah.
No, that's interesting. And what you both mentioned is profound. And I think there's some kind of, one can connect what Mama Khanyisile said and what Temashengu said as well. Because you mentioned the trilogy that was disrupted. And Temashengu mentioned that it's important to identify what was lost and name what was lost for us to be able to dismantle whatever it is that's holding us. I don't know would you mind, Mama Khanyisile, in what would probably, I don't know if there's an order of importance in the trilogy, or I think you alluded to it somewhat when you mentioned it. Is there an order that we need to identify? And if you could go deeper in that trilogy and how it was disrupted. And in doing so, if you could also confirm whether religion, therefore, in Africa, as it is known in Africa today, is a tool of oppression which subjugates, systematizes, and desensitizes the African to his true reality. I mean, true identity, if I may say that.
Certainly. And I think for me, the order truly would start with spirituality. Because you are what you believe. But to even use belief and spirituality is a fallacy, because there's no faith or belief in spirituality. Spirituality, there's knowledge. You know, therefore you don't believe because you know. When I came and sat on this chair, I didn't believe it will support me. I've sat on many chairs before.
Yes.
I know a chair supports. So spirituality is more to knowledge, I think, which is why the people we think were backward or devilish, because that's what religion came to tell us about them, our forebearers. They have built civilizations we can't even think, present Africans, of surpassing. With all our Western education, we'll never build the pyramids that are in Kemet, which they've codenamed Egypt. We will never build the pyramids that are in Sudan currently, and we know not Sudan, actually. We know those people arrived in 639. Sudan belonged to the Southerners. Just a side thing. That's why it's hard for me to say South Sudan. I rather say Sudan Juba. Because I don't know how they are denied of the legacy of Sudan, and the others have the full name Sudan. So I call them not Sudan. But those pyramids, they were built by women. We can't even think of surpassing that feat. We can't think of surpassing a civilization that was found in 2010. It's in Mpumalanga. The person who stumbled upon it accidentally through a plane crash called it Adam's
Calendar, is it?
Adam's calendar.
Yeah.
Something like that. Because for them, Adam could be the oldest people, so as a white person. Adam is like the oldest person he could think of. But that civilization is 260,000 years old, which means it predates everything we are seeing. It predates so-called Shona, so-called Zulu, so-called... And the interesting thing is that civilization and the Great Zimbabwe civilization and the Pyramid of Giza all stand on the 23rd degree latitude. The beds, decoration beds, the hawks made from clay are similar in all three civilizations. That civilization has a moon calendar carved in stone. It has a menstrual cycle calendar carved in stone. We can never think of surpassing these civilizations because religion in essence stupefies. I think I want to pause here.
Yes.
Anything that wants you to believe blindly, that does not want you to question it, that promises you of a world where nobody has gone and come back, is problematic. And then critics will say, oh, but you also are not sure if ancestors are there. Of course we know, because we have reincarnation in African spirituality. We have people who reincarnate, who actually know how it is in the other world. Be that as it may, if we don't operate on full knowledge, which is our spirituality, and we operate on faith, that's why we don't fix our environments. Do you think Christians in South Africa are concerned about the last 30 years of decay? Do you think they are? What concerns them first? Their journey to heaven and how they stand with Jesus? Or what concerns them is how culture has been destroyed in South Africa in the last 30 years? Which one is more primary for Christians? Same with African Muslims. I mean, we were watching a documentary yesterday and I'm just like, what is this? On Sudan, before the civil war broke out, they call them Khalwas, where they train young boys in the study of Quran. The abuse, the rape, the torture. I'm just like, you are producing angry African men. And then you wonder when it's broken into civil war like this. What have you been producing? So for me, in the listing, honestly, I would say, for the sake of the podcast, because we don't have 3 hours, I would not even go further. I will stop at spirituality. It's so central. African spirituality was a mix of science and mythology. That's why we could produce the pyramids. You needed spirituality, you needed mathematics, you needed geometry, you needed so much to build the pyramids. Now, religion just tells you, as long as you believe and you sing and you speak in a language that's not even yours, I call it gibberish, speak in tongues, and you don't even know what you are saying yourselves, you are fine. It doesn't require you to produce something. It requires you to produce faith, and by faith, you, not your community, go to heaven. Have you thought about it? Think about the songs we sing in Christianity. I don't know if you speak our languages, but they say, I, wangi tatala, wangi begala, amfumana, kabata, but amfumana, haki yali hodimo. Ha ampulusa. It's me. There's no community.
So In other words, I think what you've said is very deep. And the sense I'm getting is there is a distinct difference then between spirituality and religion. Yeah, and if we could just touch in passing, not in detail, what that difference could be, because I've understood as well that spirituality is much broader than religion. I don't know, it's just anyone who wants to tackle that, the differences there between spirituality and religion.
I think I'll come in the end.
Yeah.
I want to allow my sister and my daughter to come in.
How would you view spirituality and religion, the differences?
I think one of the differences that I've talked about is that spirituality is a way of being.
Yes.
And religion is based on text. For me, there's a fundamental difference.
Yes.
So as Africans, the we that's being talked about is what we do. It's not written anyway. It's a way of life. So yeah, for me, spirituality, I also think of how our ancestors transcended, how they connected to God, Musikawano, Muari, and how they used culture.
Yes.
Like, I play them better. I'll show you later.
Yeah.
And they used that instrument to connect to God through spirit mediums. So there was, like, they used their culture to connect to God. And that is demonized by the mainstream religions. They say our way of being, of connecting to God is wrong, and it's demonized. And so I see the judgment in Christianity, but the openness to other ways of being in spirituality.
Yes.
I want to end there.
Yeah, I think that's interesting what you mentioned, and I think it points to how the African identity has been changed. I think Temashengu mentioned that we should actually name some of these things. And you mentioned, as I said previously, the trilogy as well. So the part of that attack is on African spirituality.
Well, the fundamental
attack
is on African spirituality.
Which means, from what I understand, that somehow one would lose their identity and their sense of being once they lose that anchoring in that spirituality.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, the official salute in the Indian army is Jai Hindi because they are Hindu. Hindu are the people. The language is Hindi. The spirituality is Hinduism. They are not lost. They know who they are. India is a nuclear state. The West can talk to India from a distance. You will never have Marines landing on India and attacking India. They're a nuclear state. Indians produce. South Africans would say, oh, Tata is an ugly car. And I would say, show me a machine that manufactures toilet paper. Not a car that makes toilet paper that is made by Africans in South Africa or Africans anywhere else. It could be ugly, but it is produced by Indians.
Yes.
So spirituality, as you said, it's large, and Usisi said it so perfectly, that religion is based on a text, and that text does not cover manufacturing. It does not cover political economy. It does not cover geography. It does not cover technology. It's a text that is a walk between you and the so-called God. And half the time, 99% of the time, this text is based on a historical fact that happened. between a particular people and the God they believed in, that we are now taking and trying to make it ours and live it. So I like what she said, that there's a date and time for religion. We know Christianity started in 1 AD, Anno Domino, in Latin. For us who are not Christian, we say CE, Common Era, which is the time in which we live. But when did African spirituality start? You can't put a date in time, because you are in African spirituality as African spirituality is in you. It is because you are, and you are because it is.
Yeah.
There's no date and time. That's why we don't proselytize, what they call evangelism. We don't stand in corners and try and recruit you.
Yes.
Because it's in you. Also, that's why through all the pre-colonial wars that were fought, there is not a single war that was fought based on African spirituality. Shona people never attacked Zulu people because you slaughter a goat, but we slaughter a sheep.
Yeah.
They never attacked them because, for us, Moari can be the breasted one and the masculine one, but you don't describe them in those terms. There has never been a single war, and I think I just want this to sink to your listeners. Not a single war in Africa was fought based on spirituality.
No crusades.
It was about resources. It was about power, which is normal for all human beings. Never. We don't even convert it to our spirituality. That's why even when a woman got married, and I'm sure it's like that in your cultures, and I'm glad there are 4 different cultures in this room. Even when you got married as a woman, when you get to the homestead, if it was a patrilineal society, when you go to the homestead of your in-laws, they had to erect an altar for you within the homestead where you speak to your people, because they know that the DNA does not stop. If I am Litchfield and I'm married to Tshabalala, it's better let me use African surnames. If you are Mabuza and you're married to Mkhize, the Mkhizes know that just because our bride is Mabuza, it doesn't mean when she becomes Mkhize here, her people are going to stop operating through her. So they would have to erect an altar. And then sometimes even when you're struggling to give birth or whatever, they would say, we don't think your people are happy, go back home and let them speak to your people and just ask, is it on your side? Are the people unhappy? Have we wronged them in any way? Because they knew these things are real. Now, honestly, the way we are living now is not spiritual. It's religious. And religion is somebody else's text. That's why for you, and I'll say this and then I'll keep quiet and give it back to you. That's why to be a proper Muslim, you have to change your name and have an Arabic name. And to be a proper Muslim, you need to be able to speak Arabic, because the Quran is originally written in Arabic. For you to be a proper Christian, you must get a Christian name. And you need to know how to speak the language of the people evangelizing you. If it is the French, the Bible initially would have been written in French. If it's English, and then you have translated versions to our languages, which some of them say things, you ask yourself, what are they even saying? Because it doesn't even make sense what they are translating. So honestly, if I would say in summary for the listeners, so we don't confuse them, the fundamental difference between spirituality and religion is that religion is always somebody else's belief system. Spirituality is endogenous, it is in you.
Yes.
And it does not require you to stop being yourself for you to practice it. The other two are asking you, Islam and Christianity are asking you to be an African so that you can fully embrace them.
I love what you just said there. I was reading somewhere, I won't mention who said it, for the sake of keeping the context African. But they said that spirituality is recognizing that everything in the universe is within you.
Yes.
Okay.
And you should ask all from yourself.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's a very powerful point that you've just made. Now, in terms of...
So to pick the conversation, just quickly there, let's help our people.
Yes.
That's why, my sister, I say to people, I don't consult. I don't seek inyanga. I don't seek isangoma. I don't do those things, because the answers must come to you first at your altar. So what you've said is so profound. Because this consultation thing pre-colonially, honestly, was more for communal,
situations.
extreme, thank you for that word, extreme communal problems. My sister, you said, what is your nationality pre-colonially?
My ethnicity?
Yeah. Manyika. So I don't call them ethnicities, I call them nations, because we were downgraded in the ethnicities. Manyika. Now, when Manyika people suddenly suffer, their cows are always dying at age 7, they just die. Our girls, when they turn 15, they break up with rash, we don't know what's going on. Then they seek consultation and they say, what have we done wrong? Or is anyone amongst us doing something that is not Manyika? They're doing something that for Manyika people is not permissible, it's a taboo. Then they say, today people want a promotion, they go and consult.
Yeah.
People want peace, they go and consult. People are no, you're even consulting wrong mediums. The answers are within you. I am liking what you said. That's why I said I have to come in quickly, then just help our people. The answers, nature is in you and you are in nature. The answers are in you. Fight it at your altar with your ancestors.
Absolutely.
It's not religion where the pastor comes and tells you, God showed me that you should sell all your policies and give the money to the church, but God didn't talk to me. No, for us, it is hardly that people will tell you things your altar has not shown you.
Yes.
It's a confirmation. When somebody else tells you something, it's a confirmation.
Exactly.
But I think that's also because we, again, I think in the spirit of naming things, we approach spirituality in the same way that religion is approached. You know, you cannot speak to God, however, you don't speak to the Holy Spirit, however, you don't speak to Jesus, however, or Muhammad or Allah. It's like the military. It's a hierarchical. Religion it's stratified. Religion is very stratified and it's hierarchical. Spirituality is not like that. Your relationship with Abapansi, Badimu, with the deities is like a relationship that you would have with a living person. It's like the relationship that I have with you. We discuss, we argue, we cry, we have a relationship. That's what a relationship is. So I think for anyone that is looking into spirituality that is coming from a religious context, you have to bear in mind that it's very egalitarian. And it's within you, really. It really is within you, but it's also, it's a relationship. It's not a point of fear. It's not a point of fear. Because that's another thing. In Abrahamic religions require fear in you for you to be an active participant. You have to be in a constant state of fear, and you have to be in a constant state of judgment also, which is, I really liked when you brought that up. Because there's a lot more nuance in spirituality. There's an understanding that two things can be true at the same time. That's not true in Abrahamic religions also. One thing is true. It's a very binary system also, which is something else that we don't have in spirituality. We don't have binaries.
Yes. I think it's important, if I can just come in with one sentence there that you mentioned. You mentioned the point of fear. And I had written in my notes there that a spiritual act is to accept that we can never be 100% sure that our beliefs equal truth. Can we?
In spirituality.
I was trying to say here that spirituality is a broader concept, as I had mentioned before, and it's a way individuals seek to express meaning and purpose and the way they experience their connectedness to the moment.
So yes, I think if I hear you, I would simplify it for the listeners in this way. Spirituality is a journey from birth to death, and it is a constant discovery from birth to death. It is a seeking of the truth, where sometimes when you find the truth, what was the truth yesterday is no longer the truth today. So it is not scripted. Yes. It's a system, truly, I don't know why we don't embrace it. It's a system that allows you at 10 to think like a 10-year-old.
Yes.
Where religion, as you say, it says if you die, especially let's look at the born-again fraternity, if you die at 10 and you never accepted Christ as your personal savior, you're going to hell. Religion says you are 10, so act like a boy. Your knowledge is limited to being a shepherd to cows and goats. It's limited to you looking at what older men are doing. So when you do commit an act that is wrong, when you commit a wrong, when we sit and we interrogate what you've done, we say, oh, she is a child. Does not know this, and this. Then we are 15, and the 30-year-olds will say, she's 15. She doesn't know this. Because we understand that it's a cumulative journey.
It's a journey of becoming.
Yes, it's a journey of becoming, and it's cumulative. And that's why we call them rites of passage. That's why it's a rite of passage from this stage to the next stage, because now we say your knowledge of science and spirituality allow you now to produce this. Your knowledge of science allow you now. That's why people like Shaka then come and interrupt, and they're heroes, because we are like, okay, you're too small to have killed a lion on your own. Because that's not how it happens here. We should have been at a certain age. Then we know that, oh, okay, there is so much ancestral favor on this person, you know. So yes, I hear what you are saying here. It is 100%.
Yeah, and coming to the relationship with ancestors, I know when Christianity was introduced, that was said to be pagan. The way we connected with ancestors, we were told you must not worship ancestors. And I know a lot of African spiritualists deny that we worship ancestors. There is a relationship, but we do not worship ancestors. I don't know if anyone wants to kind of elaborate on that in terms of the relationship between African spirituality and ancestors.
Well, I think I'll answer that by looking at a concept called witch doctor. So the English-speaking people will understand it better amongst your listeners. I don't know what that is. What is a doctor in Manyika, my sister? It's in Zulu, it's inyanga. That's the one that heals. Ganga. What is a witch or a wizard? Mure. So can you have nganga mure? Pre-colonial. You can't. No. You are either inyanga or umthakati. You are either ngaka or umuluwa. There's no ngaka mului, so there's no witch doctor. But it was not a mistake that the British came with that concept in all their colonies. They even in India, they had it because Hinduism is a spirituality. They have that concept because they're trying to say to you, rubbish everything that you are about. It is nothing but witchcraft. There's no healing in it. There's no healing. So for me to answer that, then I would say that even the term ancestral worship, I don't know. It's English. I don't know. Tell me what is ancestral worship in Zulu. Can you try and tell me in a line in Manyika? Ne? I'm saying it right. What if I had to say translate ancestral worship? How would you say it in Manyika?
There's no equivalent.
Thank you.
There is equivalence, but what we would do is we say kupira.
Thank you. Which is not worship.
It's not worship. It's communicating. I don't even know.
I feel you, my sister. No, I asked you on purpose.
Yes.
I asked you on purpose because I know in Zulu also, I can't translate the word ancestral worship. I can't. Because for starters in Zulu, even the word worship does not exist. We took a word and Jack rolled it.
I was about to ask you, what is it?
No,
it's to esteem, actually.
To esteem or to acknowledge.
To appreciate.
I said to you, I like a particular drink when we talked. And then when I walked in here, you said, oh, by the way, I bought you that drink. In Zulu, when I talk to other people, I'll say, oh, so unkhonzile. And bought me this. Yes.
It's to honor. It's to appreciate.
No, it's not to worship. It does not exist, which is why we had to borrow it and bastardize it and say worship ukonza. So ancestral worship does not exist. It's an Englishman's fantasy. It's not ours. We don't worship ancestors. In as much as we don't even worship the originator.
I think I need to pause here and let it sink. We don't have a God because worship is to God. We have what we call originators. Mwari, and I took a sense that I'm pronouncing it wrong. My sister pronounced it.
That's called
Mwari, it's okay. And it's Moari as well. It's acceptable.
Mwari is not a God. Mwari is an originator. That's why in Zulu we don't say, where do you come from? We say Udabugati. Who's the origin?
the source.
The source. Thank you, Baba.
Musikaban, creator of people.
Yes. So we never had gods. Now, even those people, great as they are, so great that they don't even participate in our daily lives, like the gods of the Abrahamic religions, we still don't worship them. So how could we worship ancestors? Because after them come deities, who we also don't worship. Like for Zulu people, Nom Kubunwan, the goddess, and I say goddess in quotes because even goddess you can't translate into an African language. But for the sake of people who are listening for understanding, Nom Kubunwan is the one big deity in Zulu mythology after Umvelingan, of fertility, of rains, of first harvest, first rains. That's why that thing is held in September, the reed dance. It is in honor to Unomkhulwan. But you can't say during the reed dance, and she has done the Swati one, there is nowhere where there is worship of that deity. So if we don't worship the originator, the deity, who in that pecking order, that's how the hierarchy is, how could we worship ancestors? How could we? People who lived and walked the earth, who are human just like you and me. Because some of these deities were never human. They were spirit. Like Nomkhulwan was never a human. Nomkhulwan is always a spirit. So if we don't worship the first two in the pecking order, how could we be worshipping ancestors? It was coined because, again, they wanted you to rubbish everything that is about you. Also, it could also have been lack of understanding because, as I said, religion stupefies. So when colonizers came here, they went the brightest cookies on earth because religion had stupefied them too. They could not understand that there is anything outside of religion. They could not understand men and women living together in equity.
Yes.
You know, the stereotype that African men are lazy comes from both Arab and European colonizers. Because think about it, and then I'll keep quiet. Think about it in a pre-colonial setting of a village. We woke up around 4 or 5 a.m. because it's scorching hot here. The women would go to the fields because we were the tillers of the land, not from oppression, but because we have the womb. So if we touch the land, it will be fertile. That was the understanding. Only us were allowed to deal with agriculture. So we leave at 4 a.m. We go there because we don't want when the sun comes out, we are still in the fields. Do you think we took the babies that are young to us to the fields in this scorching sun? No, we left them at home. After you suckled them, you leave them with a few girls, but who stays at home? The men will go out with the boys. Once that livestock is out there and it requires shepherds, it's the boys that stay. The African men retire back to the household to make sure nothing goes wrong because you've left little girls only there to look after babies. So truly, who raised our babies? It was the men. We've turned that upside down in the listing. So the men will be there. Of course, they will do their own thing, hold their own indabas and whatever, but they're within the homestead. Now, when it's around 12, it's really scorching. The women also retire back home. I've lived in Eswatini and I've seen this. They retire back home because it's too hot to be out. They'll go back in the afternoon. Now, when they came here, these colonizers, they see this. The women are tilling the soil. These men watching children around, watching children and drinking beer. They're like, these are lazy men. That context, that stereotype has followed the African men to date.
These are lazy men, and then these are unreasonably strong women. Something else that has followed that.
We don't crack, we can't try, we must just be strong.
Well, it's interesting. You were mentioning that in African context, some words don't exist. And there's one word that I've been struggling and asking people about. Devil. Does it exist in any African language?
No. In Zulu, to Satan, which is Satan.
Yeah.
It does not exist.
It does not
but
exist.
You know why? We don't have another fundamental difference you asked us. See, by right, our things are so huge. You need a podcast just for a select topic. Because we answered you, my sister answered you, she answered, but we never got to actually the crux. Another fundamental difference between religion and spirituality is that in spirituality, there's no heaven or hell.
Yes.
There's no lake of fire waiting for you to go and burn. You are good because you are good, because it is in you, because it is what you live. It is socialization. It is your culture.
Yes.
That's why we don't have sin. You break the cultural code. Which is why when colonizers came, the people who were refusing to convert were like, this is bastardizing a culture. Mekatilili Wamenza of Kenya without education articulated and said, if we convert and we embrace this, it is neo-colonialism. Of course, she named it in her language. But if we look at what she said today, we can see she was saying this is going to be neo-colonialism. Because for us, if you take away our culture, you've taken away our identity. Everything. We are done.
Yes.
So, yes, that's another fundamental to us.
You've taken away our future.
Satan, yes.
We don't have hell. We don't have heaven. Those concepts don't exist. So we don't do good because we are ticking the box of the things we did to enter heaven.
Fear.
No.
Or we are induced by fears.
Fear. Thank you.
No, that,
Which I think is the other difference is religion is also a punitive system. It's about punishment, which spirituality is not. Spirituality is about, what's the English word again? Reformation. It's about reformation. It's about being able to be reassembled back into society after you've made a transgression. It's about growth. It's about transformation. It's about giving you another opportunity. Religion is not about that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Religion is mess up once and it's done, which is what God did to Lot's wife. It's what happened to the Egyptians. It's what
happened to Moses.
It's what happened to Moses. It's what one mistake and you're done. That's religion.
Wow.
There is no room for error.
I coined the word reconstitution. That's what spirituality does. It allows you to make mistakes, and then we cleanse, and then we intercede for you to the originator through ancestors and deities, and we are reconstituted. We even reconstitute even after death. Even if you lived the most horrible life, we have ways of cleansing and reuniting your spirit with the spirits of your people, which is another thing we need to quickly define, my brother, to help our people, especially those in the diaspora, because we are based in Canada. Christians say, oh, he was a rapist all his life. Now suddenly he dies. Now he's an ancestor. No, they are not. Firstly, when we say ancestor, it's like saying vegetables. There are categories, different ones. And I always promise people who are listening that we'll have a podcast just to unpack the various ones. But and I use that word in code, the lesser of all of them is what in Zulu is called Idlos, which sadly has become the word collectivized.
Exactly.
Idlos is someone that's just passed on. And that just could be 4 years, 5 years. Okay. They are still on a journey of cleansing. They are not yet, in Zulu, they are not gathered with their people because the things that they didn't do on earth must still be done. Which is why when most people see them, they're either morose, crying, or asking for something. You can't ask anything from Idlos. They can't help you. They need help from you because it's things they didn't do on earth. So they need your body because they are spirit. It's like if it's a goat they didn't slaughter, you have to slaughter it for them. If it's something they didn't do, they wronged him, and you need to go to them and ask for forgiveness. They can't, you need to go for them. So that finally they will be gathered to the ancestors, and they will take on the other forms within that ancestral entourage. So, yeah, it's a podcast on its own.
So when we say we are Madlozi, it's a meaningless concept.
It's meaningless. I never talk to Amazozi. I never do. I never talk to my mother. My mom passed in 2015. I only started talking to my mom last year. And I have a friend who is a Sangoma who wanted to eat me alive. Your own mother. I was like, you went through Ukobela. So half of what you believe is through your Kobela. Me, I didn't go through any Kobela. What I believe or do or practice is what I know is engraved within me. Because while my mom was not a churchgoer, but I know that my mom was also a mixer of Christianity and spirituality. You know, when they have home altars, the Bible is there, but Umut is there and whatever. She was a mixer. So I'm just like, I can't talk to her because she's still on her own journey of cleansing. And I never did, surprise, until a white woman. You know, when they want to talk, they talk. White woman whom I had never discussed anything with, we worked together on holding the BRICS Bank accountable. She sent me a long text. She said, firstly, I'm white. So this is so strange.
Oh, she didn't know you from before, is it?
No, we know each other, but I mean, we never talked. We worked together in holding the BRICS Bank accountable. So, I mean...
You spoke professionally, not...
She does not even know how many we are at home, if my mother is late or alive. She says, firstly, as a white woman, I feel so strange doing this. But I could not. It was so vivid in my dream. I had to tell you. You guys, you were all the girls in your family playing a ball outside, actually basketball like. And you were about to score and win. And your mom appeared and said, enough. And took the ball away from you. She was so angry with you. What does it mean? Because I tried in the dream I was watching, I tried to ask myself, why is your mother so angry with you? And then she says, it's like she read my thoughts because she answered, she will know why I'm angry. And then I said, oh, now I understand. Now she's been gathered to her people. So now it's enough. I can't not talk to her anymore.
Wow.
Now I have to. She's past being issues. And it makes sense she would take that little time because 90% of what she did was Isintu. It was African spirituality. It was just that element of colonialism that this Jesus is addictive. Jesus is an opium, by the way. It's like cocaine. It's so hard to detangle yourself. So it was just that aspect. So no, I don't pasha amadlozi, my brother. I stay away from them.
Yeah, but we honor them.
Of course, you honor them in a manner that when they are requiring something from you, you have to, as I say, that is our role to them.
Yes.
But not you asking them for something. You should ask the other categories.
Interesting.
I'm actually aware of that.
No, I think for the sake of the podcast, we don't have time. But I think for us outside, we can talk about those other categories.
Yes. No, that is very interesting. And from what we've been discussing, I think one can have confidence that religion is a tool to control, and that's helped the African to lose identity. In terms of moving forward, I know this runs deep within African society because some people will fight you if you try and tell them about how they've been opiated by religion. They will fight you. Now, from your experience, how are young people approaching religion? I know in Europe nowadays, people have done away with going to church, and churches are being turned into accommodation and all that. But in Africa, we seem to be moving the opposite direction. I don't know how young people are approaching this issue about Christianity, Islam.
Well, my social circles, I think I've had the extreme blessing of being able to interact with people of my age group across the diaspora as well. So throughout the African continent, I've also interacted with Caribbean people, Afro, South American, African American. I think it's different. I think for the most part, we are still very much affected by religion culturally. So I think it's becoming more common with people of my age group and generation where they might not be practicing Christians or practicing Muslims, but they are culturally that. So in the sense that the whole year they're quote unquote sinning, but then when Ramadan comes around, maybe they'll fast or they'll go to church for Easter, for Christmas, but on a regular Sunday they're doing something else. But at the same time that's happening, there's also a widespread questioning and a kind of rejection of anything attached to the colonial legacy, where it's like, why am I doing what my brothers and sisters have done and what my parents have done and what my grandparents have done and my great grandparents? Like, if if this religion was meant to really save and liberate me, why couldn't it save and liberate the people that brought it to me? Like, why did my ancestors have to be beaten into submission? Why couldn't they just voluntarily change if this is really truly meant for me? So I think with my generation, it's kind of hard to tell per se what's happening, because it's different pockets. Some people, as you were saying earlier, will stone you for even raising this as a point of issue, versus others who are like me, who are like, okay, I'm ready to throw the whole thing away.
Yes.
Others are still in between, where they're like Ukoko, who are tap dancing between both. So I think it's for Gen Zs, it's a lot, because we're trying to really find a way to function as Black people and as Africans within this context. But at the same time, there's so much going on with my generation. At the same time, I think another reason that we find ourselves in a quagmire where you can't really tell what's happening because different people are doing different things is it's also become very much normalized within the African context that people of my generation are not first language indigenous language speaking. There's a lot of us who are first language English speaking, first language French speaking, first language Portuguese speaking. Recently, I hope none of them see this video. Recently, I was at a party, and it was a all Black gathering physically, but mentally or ideologically, I mean, I think a bulk of us may as well just be white. Bulk of us in that room truly were just white, because very few, in terms of culture, very few people. I mean, there were about 25 of us, and I think only 4 could have an intermediate conversation in a vernacular language, or could speak in vernacular for longer than 2 minutes. So that's something else. Is, I think you cannot access your spirituality unless you speak your language. Yes. So there's also that. You are not going to have, you will never open the door to your spirituality if you cannot open the door to your language. So that's another important thing, is for my generation, for a lot of people of my generation, another thing that locks them out of being able to practice African spirituality is they cannot speak their language.
But it's sad, because if they are locked out of African spirituality because of language, it means culturally they are also lost. So you have Black people who are Black people by skin, but nothing else about them is Black. But sadly then, it is also in South Africa now, amongst the Gen Zs and millennials, who also are the first Africans who could not speak an African language, the millennials. There's this rising anti-Zulu sentiment by people who can't even speak their own mother tongue. And I always say, how do you know if that person is even Zulu? If you can't speak yours, can you identify another one? How do you know they are Zulu, these people that you hate? So it's systemic hatred that's being hooked up and driven. Now, if you don't know yourself, that's the danger. If this trilogy of spirituality, culture, and language, if you sit outside of it, I can sell you anything, then you'll buy it.
You have no grounding.
That's it. It tells me then I want to live. My mom died just before 90, and I mean, part of it was really self-made. She took Isnay for a long time, and I mean, it blocks your face. She would have lived longer. She had good genes. So I'm always like, I have to outlive her. But then I look at the people, I'll be stuck with the Gen Zs and the millennials. I'm just like, if they take power in Africa, we are going to be ruled by Chinese and Japanese and everybody else but ourselves.
If we take power, we're submitting ourselves back to colonialism. It's at that point. I think there are a lot of colonial apologists. There are a lot of people who present apartheid or colonialism or slavery as these far-fetched ideas that are just, far in the past. And I mean, it's not to say that, I mean, if you think about it time-wise, yes, it is in the past, but these were events that changed the trajectory of what it means to be Black and African forever. There is no way we can ever reverse that. It was a permanent feature in our trajectory as a people, which is why we can never forget about it. 500 years from now, we should still be speaking about it, because it is part of our cultural fabric now as a people. So, but it's becoming so lost onto so many, as you were saying, like millennial and Gen Z
Here's
Black
the
people, and
challenge,
it's
though. What you're mentioning, I think, if we do not change, because everything starts with education. This is, if you say your peers, you mentioned that you're a Pan-Africanist, but you're saying culturally your peers, most of them seem to be Eurocentric in their approach to things and thinking. I think that's a reflection of the education you're receiving. Because there's my wife, maybe I mustn't refer to her as my wife on podcast, but she's my wife.
I mean, there's nothing wrong.
Yeah, she always says that, quoting a famous philosopher and writer, that education is not neutral.
no.
Yeah, it's trying to mold you into
a
something,
certain kind of
shape into
person.
something.
Amen.
That's right. Yeah. So I think that's a reflection of that. And in terms of naming things, I think that could be another point in the process to decolonize, to look at education, our educational system. And as Mama Khanyisile said, if you don't have language, you've got no access to your spirituality.
I would say, my brother, can you separate education from spirituality?
No, I'm just saying.
No, I'm not saying. Aniti, we have to ask these questions for our viewers.
Yes.
Can you separate education from spirituality?
Yes.
Or for those who are religious?
Yeah.
Can you separate education from religion?
Yes.
You can't. Our education is destroyed primarily because it's become a religious education. Don't be fooled by South Africa that says we have banned prayer in schools.
Yeah.
It is still a Christian education. You know why? Because when you read history, you are still reading about the First World War and the Second World War. You are still reading about the ships that arrived of the Dutch settlers.
Yes.
You are still reading about the UN. You are still reading, if you study English, you are still reading Shakespeare and John Milton, which really came through Christianity. Because that's Christian education. Because Christianity is a male religion. God is a man, Jesus is a man. The first disciples were men, the angels are little boys in wings, but they are boys. That's why the biggest church in the world, and people always deny it, but it's a fact. The Catholic Church is still the largest denomination in the world, still does not allow priests. Women. So you can't divorce education from spirituality. So the day we turned our back on our spirituality, we turned our back on Afrocentric education. Yes, that's why now we are producing Eurocentric people. I am shocked that anyone who is African, and as she says, there's many of them, not just in South Africa. I've gone to 49 African countries now. It's a blessing, I thank my ancestors for. You get Africans who truly believe that colonialism civilized us. Oh yeah, you get Africans who truly believe that slavery happened because it was our fault, because we enslaved one another before, as though there was no slavery amongst white people, as though there was no slavery amongst the Mongol race. And you see now the Japanese were enslaving the Koreans. Look at the pre-colonial Korean movies. Look at how Koryo itself was being enslaved by, what's the other kingdom? Koryo was in the north. The Koryo is where North Korea is today. The other one, I forget the name, and it's the prime, is where South Korea is. Look at how they destroyed Koryo because they used to enslave them. Slavery has been synonymous with all cultures of the West. And if in West Africa they practiced it, in the South not so much, by the way, without defense. Not so much. There's a very little history of slavery in Southern Africa, but you find it in the West a lot. Did that give white people an excuse to come and chattel slavery? No.
Yeah.
But you get Africans who quote that.
Who will defend.
Oh, but we were also enslaving each other, so it was okay for white people. So this Eurocentric education is because, again, the theology, my brother, because the apex, the spirituality is gone. Because you can't divorce your education from your spirituality. It is in spirituality that we learned how to harness nature. It's in spirituality that we learned how to respect the soil. That's why we never had barren soil. It was in spirituality that we learned how to call the rain. Yes. We were a land of milk and honey and rainfall because we had rain queens and rain-making queens. His mother
Umasiziva.
They,
They are ziva, the water.
I know, ngoba in Zulu isiziba is water.
So I heard that she was actually in contact with one of those people, Umasiziva, who used to be consulted when there was drought. And they used to go Njelele, yes. And the moment they walked from Jelele back home, the rain would fall.
Jomo Kenyatta has written an excellent book about it. He's not one of my prime Kenyan stalwarts. The Dan Kimati is.
Yes.
I think Jomo Kenyatta inflicted tribalism on Kenya.
Yes, absolutely.
For another day. But I don't subscribe to the school that says everything about you is bad, so we throw you away. It's in an excellent book, which I say all Africans must read. On Facing Mount Kenya is the name. On rainmaking in the Kikuyu people. He says, I remember as long as I was 7, 8, 9, 10, in the whatever they did, the balance had to be there. I, as the boy, had to be holding hands with the girl. That was the last part of the ritual. He says, when we first went up, the older people will say, dress up. It will rain and it will be cold. He says, you look at them and you're like, what do you know? He says, I never was rained on that much. So for the succeeding ones, I made sure I dress up. He says, look, I knew when we walked down that mountain, as you say about him and his grandma, Umama, the mother. He says, when we walk down Mount Kenya, walk down with the rain. That's another fundamental difference between religion and Christianity. In religion, you use spirituality to fetch things. In Christianity, you pray and wait for God to answer if he decides to answer. And when he doesn't, we even make excuses for him and we say, that is his will, that's how he wanted. Here we don't pray and wait, we fetch it. He's given you enough knowledge and science. You mix the two and you fetch the rain. So yes, where that knowledge is lost because education is spiritual. Now our education is religious.
Yes. And it has wiped out that spirituality. So no more rain, no more whatever else mysteries we used to experience.
Yeah. But it's also made us to put so much faith on government and not do things for ourselves. It's Christianity. It says pray, have faith and wait, God will answer.
Yeah, we call it magical level of consciousness.
Thank you, ma.
Thank you.
In fact, I was going to come in there as well. And Francesca just mentioned it about the magical consciousness that we have. Somewhere, I've been saying all along that religion not only frees people from their guilt and crisis, but also frees them from critical thinking. Yeah, that's effectively what it does, because you admit that you don't know, but you're trying to console yourself by saying, okay, I don't know, let me just have faith. Yeah, and you're scared to question things. Yeah. No, that's been an interesting discussion. We passed the hour mark. Yeah, and just to
already,
yes,
that was quick.
Yeah, I think just to summarize and what we can take from this discussion, maybe if we could go around. I don't know whether Mama Khanyisile wants to go first or last, or
last.
Okay, so maybe Temashengu, you can start in terms. I think summarize the discussion in terms of what African identity, religion, and spirituality, in whichever way you want to focus, whatever area you want to focus on. Yeah, but within that context, or if you want to add anything extra that you may not have mentioned in the discussion.
I think in terms of a way forward,
yes.
The first thing one has to do, so that's why I love Biko so much, you have to get to a state of being aware of your blackness, be aware of your Africanness. And once you have come to that consciousness, take the next steps to say, how did I become Black? When did my racialization begin? When did Africa become Africa? Question your origin, come to a point of understanding who you truly are, dig deep into your ethnic and your, proper nation, but dig deep into your ethnic identity. If you are not able to speak your language, start today. It's never too late. I think most people also feel ashamed to make errors in their ethnic language, and it's like if you will never know any language completely. Even with English, you will learn new words at 45, even if you've been speaking it for 20 years. So it's okay to not know every word in your language, but start the journey. But most importantly, and this is a very tough one, accept, understand, and heal your internalized anti-Blackness. Because if you don't start with that, nothing else will come correct. Understand that each and every single one of us have been socialized to buy into some aspect of anti-Blackness or of anti-Africanness. And until you confront that within yourself, you won't be able to make any steps forward. So
you mentioned healing, and that's very powerful because even Frantz Fanon mentions that we've got psychological damage as a result of colonization. So I like that part where you say there's healing required. Fran, I don't know if you've got anything just to summarize and
I think
your take from the discussion. And
very, very enlightening for me, very enriching. And I'm happy that the work that I currently do, I deem it spiritual work. As you were sharing, I was like, that's what I'm doing with my coaching. And connecting to Tema, we have to know who we are. Our identity, self-awareness, that's a big part of the work. And it's spiritual work. You cannot be doing self-work and take away the spiritual aspect of it. So I'm seeing the connection that we should be prepared to do inner work. And that inner work for me, awareness of who you are, your genealogy. I call it the genogram, the detailed genogram. Who are you? At least 3 generations. Okay. So that you get grounded, and then you can then begin to question things from that grounding. So reclaiming culture. I play Mbira. I started at 37. I don't know why I started playing it, but I just knew that it was healing me, and it's been healing other people. So the instruments, the culture, the language, the spiritual, our way of being. Let's learn. I cannot claim that I know it because my parents were kind of, but at least I'm connecting with you. I'm putting myself in places where my Africanness, I can try and live as much as I can. Connecting with human beings like Mama Khanyisile. So I feel very honored to be here. And thank you, Sotemba, for letting me be part of this podcast. And thank you, Tema.
Thank you. And last but not least, to Mama Khanyisile.
I think, thank you so much for joining, Francesca. It's been hard for me to say your name because I almost want to give you an African
I'm
name.
Daiziwe. That's my mother's. Which one? Daiziwe.
Daiziwe. Yes, see, I like that one. Yes. My brother Sotemba and my daughter Temashengu. I think it was a great discussion. For me, ancestral, very spiritual. And I think what I take from it is that we have not decolonized. And because we have not decolonized, we live like people who are in a mental asylum. We are like people holding leaking cans and we are trying to fill them with water. We are told to develop from an economic perspective, but we can't have socio-economic theories which are African if we are detached from African spirituality. We can't have socio-political theories if their education is in religion. We can't have them if we are not rooted in our culture. We can't have social systems that are African if we are not living within our cultures. We can't have the spirituality and the culture if we don't speak the language. So for me, honestly, it's just like one big word. Can we start the journey to decolonize? And decolonization is a very uncomfortable thing. Decolonization is what asks you to ask,
what was South Africa before South Africa was South Africa? Is it even worthwhile? Funny, I was listening to someone on the radio as we came to the Uber here. He interviewed, I don't know what radio station it was, who was panting so much for one South Africa, let's keep the colonial borders. And I'm just thinking, you can't say that while we are whooping up anti-Zulu hatred. And I don't have a single Zulu relative, by the way. I just look at this purely from an African perspective. So we really, in decolonization, we must interrogate these borders. These borders were put here for a reason. I'm not advocating for anarchy, but I'm just saying also we never had borders pre-colonially, and there was still order, there was still social systems, which were not the same. I like what Temashengu said initially. I thought we'll go back to it, but concept of time. How did colonization affect the Igbo? The Igbo never had central ruling. Are we aware?
Yes.
Igbo ruled themselves egalitarian way, autonomous from within. And now we are bundling them through a ruthless federal system called Federal Republic of Nigeria, where the oil is in the east and they are suffering the after effects of those oil spills, but they are not seeing the money being planted back in their community because the money is amassed and embezzled by a corrupt federal government. So it's affected them immensely, and then they fought the Biafra war to secede, and the West chiseled them in, and they lost monies and they lost everything. Now we say, oh, Igbo people are drug dealers, Igbo people are corrupt, Igbo people are this. Everything has a cause and effect, So in our decolonization, I really want us to look at these colonial borders. Yes. But me, and I know people will throw stones at me, I'm a cessationist. If a particular people want to secede and they believe they can rule themselves better than what this colonial government is offering, let them go, because they will show us that there are Africans who can rule themselves. If we had let the Igbo go in the 60s, maybe Igbo land would be a shining example of a successful African country today. But we refused them, so we will never know.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you so much to everyone for participating in this conversation. I found it rich and enlightening, and there are a lot of takes from the discussion, and I hope some of the topics will at some point in the future perhaps dig deeper into them, because it was a lot just within the hour to cover everything within the hour. Thank you so much, and hopefully we'll talk to each other next time. Thank you. Thank you so much.